Is AI going to replace DevOps jobs? This is one of the most common questions I get, and it's all over my YouTube comments. So in this video, I'm going to attempt to answer this question. And I have some recent data that is going to help you sleep better at night. So let's jump in. The data I want to share with you today is from an article by Quesma, who created a very interesting benchmark that is very relevant for us DevOps engineers and SREs. Now, what they did was they asked 14 models to add distributed traces to existing code bases using a standard method. Basically, the benchmark is giving them basic SRE tasks and then asking the AI models to solve them. And the results will surprise you. But first, the article does a really good job at explaining what distributed tracing is. So when an app runs on a single machine, you can often trace an error by scrolling through a log file. But when it runs across 50 microservices, which is very common in modern cloud-native application landscapes, that single request gets scattered into a chaotic firehose of disconnected events. Distributed tracing solves this by linking them back together, allowing you to follow a user action like clicking login as it jumps from the API gateway to the auth service to the database and back. So in other words, if you just have a simple application, you can just look at the log files if something goes wrong. But if you have tons of microservices, you need some way to track those requests across these services. And in order to do this, you need something called instrumentation, and the de facto standard for this is OpenTelemetry. So what they did was they created a benchmark for OpenTelemetry instrumentation. So basically the implementation of this distributed tracing. And they tested 14 frontier models on these tasks. And the first task that they tried was, as an example, we start with a basic task, which is adding instrumentation to a single microservice in a single language. Okay? The AI agents get a small microservice with around 300 lines of code from a realistic application and work in a Linux terminal and get the task of implementing tracing for this. And this makes me sleep a lot better because I am actually not afraid at all of AI replacing my job. As they say in the article here, they were surprised that even the top models of 2026 struggle. The tasks we proposed were trivial compared to real-world scenarios. Okay? In a typical SRE job, services are massive, legacy-written, and poorly documented. If models fail on 300 lines of clean Go code, they cannot handle production. It's not me saying this, it's in the article, okay? So in other words, they're basically saying the AI models cannot handle production yet. Now, why is that? In order to understand this properly, you need to know a little bit of AI theory here. And I've been experimenting with this over the past few months a lot. And the core concept you need to know here is what is called a context window. So when you send a prompt to an LLM, which is running in a cloud somewhere, you only get to send a certain amount of tokens. There's only a certain amount of data that you can give to an LLM, which it then can process. And this is called a context window. Now, Claude Opus 4.5 has a context window of 200,000 tokens. So in other words, you can only give it 200,000 tokens. But if you have been doing any experimentation with AI yourself, and if you have been keeping track of your context window, then you also may have noticed that when the context window is about 40% full, the performance of the AI model basically breaks down. Even though the window is 200,000, you can only really give it about 100,000 and have the model work efficiently with that. So what I have noticed in my own experiments is I will, for example, give my AI assistant a job on my home lab, and I will tell it specifically that it's not allowed to apply manifests to my Kubernetes cluster directly. It must always use GitOps. And when I give it a very complicated task, it will take those instructions and it will start exploring my cluster, and it will get a lot of context and a lot of information that it needs to process. And then because the context gets full, I have noticed that it will start ignoring instructions. It will literally say, applying to GitOps doesn't work, let me just apply it directly to the cluster. It will literally say that. And then I have to like Control C and stop it because it is basically making these decisions on its own, which can do a lot of damage potentially. And I've seen that happen with my own eyes so many times. Real quick, 73% of you guys are not subscribed to my channel, so please subscribe right now. It's a free way to support the channel and it allows me to put out free content like this every single week. So the context window is basically everything that the model can hold in its awareness at one point in time. And humans are the same. I believe humans can only remember 7 things at the same time, and that's the limit of working memory. Or at least average people can only memorize 7 things at the same time. There is a certain limit to what you can hold in your attention span in one instance. And this is what is the limiting factor of AI models currently. The second problem with AI agents is that their output is non-deterministic. What that means is that their output is not predictable. Even if you give it a prompt to output things as a JSON object with a certain specification, in my experience, about 40% of the time, it will not adhere to those instructions. You will get output that maybe includes a few lines like, oh, I understand, here is your JSON object, for example. It will include those lines. Well, if you start building applications based on that output, you can fail, right? And that is the biggest challenge that AI agents have at this point. That it's unpredictable. Now, I've been doing this for some years. I've been in this game for a while. And I can tell you that no company that runs any critical infrastructure is going to let any AI agent loose on their production environment, okay? There always needs to be a human in the loop there. Now, it doesn't mean that AI is useless. Like it fails, but it did succeed 30% of the time, okay? So I do think that these AI agents and systems are going to have a effect. So now that we know that the context window is a big limiting factor, the article also gives a few more reasons why AI agents struggle. And one of them being that it requires polyglot backend development skills. In other words, large distributed systems often are built from multiple components in multiple programming languages. AI models are really good at Python and TypeScript because those are the most common ones. But when you then start mixing in other languages here, they really start to struggle. And another reason is that there is less training data. So although adding instrumentation is a standard engineering task, it is not common practice in open source. The most popular applications where reliability matters the most are in private repositories of big tech companies such as Apple, Airbnb, or Netflix. In other words, these AI models, they're trained on Stack Overflow, GitHub, and publicly available code. And these big companies that will have advanced reliability engineering practices like this and implementations of OpenTelemetry, they don't expose their code. So the AI models don't have anything to base their work on, and that's why they're less efficient at this task. So their conclusions are that the best models struggle. The state-of-the-art Claude Opus only solved 29% of tasks. There are language gaps, and there are silent failures and cost efficiency. Okay, so it's very expensive to let AI do these tasks, even if they fail all the time. So as they say, AI SRE is still mostly hype, but there is hope, they say. So there are constantly developments being made in this field. So now to the question, will AI replace DevOps jobs? And I recently made a video about the RELF technique, for example. You can check it out over here. And in that video, I explain how software engineering is basically reduced to the cost of $10 an hour, and software development, so not engineering, but development, the act of writing code, is almost completely outsourced to AI models right now. That is a concerning trend for software engineers, and they are lying awake at night right now, at least the ones who are not asleep at the wheel. For DevOps, I think the timeline is longer. The truth is, nobody knows for sure, and nobody can know for sure. I can give you my thoughts, but I don't have a crystal ball that knows the future, right? What I can give you are my thoughts and my expectations for this. So reading this article, it gives me hope because, as we see, the frontier models are failing at entry-level SRE tasks at this point in time. Because of the context window limitations, these AI models, they cannot hold these large distributed systems in their focus, in their brain right now. So that gives me hope. But then the question is basically, okay, we're just waiting for these context windows to become bigger. And in fact, Claude Opus 4.6 came out recently, and that context window was increased from 200,000 to 1 million tokens already. So there's already developments being made over there. So on a long enough time horizon, these models are going to be more efficient at these kinds of tasks. Now, all of that being said, I am not worried about my job or my career as a DevOps engineer at all. I have no expectations that DevOps engineers are going to be replaced by AI, especially in the sense of software development being completely outsourced to LLMs. They don't have enough context to understand these distributed systems. The thing is, writing code is one thing, but if you have infrastructure that runs important applications or banks or stock exchanges, there's no room for error. There's no room for error on these large production systems. And any system, any AI system that has even a minimum percentage of error is not going to be managing any of these production systems. So yes, I think that these AI agents are going to have an effect on DevOps work and DevOps engineering. In fact, I'm just going to think it's going to have a positive effect because it's going to eliminate a lot of the toil in site reliability engineering and DevOps work. So all of the boring stuff, it can handle that perfectly. But that means that DevOps engineers are going to have more time to focus on the important stuff, to make things secure, to get that extra 9 of uptime and reliability. But I don't see AI replacing us in the near future. And finally, the best part about all of this is that AI is obviously increasing. There's $7 trillion being invested in data centers worldwide right now. And the AI boom is only going to grow. But all of that AI needs to run somewhere, right? And according to the CNCF, Kubernetes is the de facto AI platform right now. So what that means is that if AI grows, Kubernetes also grows. So the DevOps engineers who have been smart and who have been learning Kubernetes over the past few years, we are experiencing golden times right now. There's so much work available for us. There's like 130,000 jobs available for Kubernetes engineers right now. It's crazy. So if AI grows, our work also grows. If you've not learned Kubernetes yet, don't worry, I got you covered. There's a free 7-day course I created, linked in the description. So this is my current stance on this topic. I sleep really good at night knowing that there are articles out here that show that the models cannot do these types of tasks yet. I am very hopeful for the future of DevOps with the increase of AI and therefore the increased need of Kubernetes cluster management that I am very skilled at. And in general, I think, especially in the DevOps infrastructure niche, there's always going to be work for people who have high skills, okay? So if you are watching this and you have this, you identify with my approach and the craftsman's mindset that I always talk about, like I think craftsmen are not going to be out of a job anytime soon, especially in these high stakes production environments. They're not going to let AI near that. They need people who understand. So if you have deep infrastructure skills, you don't need to worry. But let me know in the comments, like maybe some of you have been using AI agents at work. I would love to know more about this. I am also learning as I go. So let me know. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.